or may not have time to take additional questions just because so many got submitted, but we're going to do our best to jump in and answer as many as we can. But feel free to be like chatting on Reddit. We'll do our best to follow along. But so here we go. Before I get in,
if everything is working now.
But that for a whole bunch of men was around tangible goals for the Aeon project and what are we doing over the course of the next period of time. It says 12 months, but I'll just give you kind of high-level priorities that we've been focusing on, that we're building the team around. Some of you may have noticed that we've been actively recruiting. We've got a number of job postings up, and there's going to be more coming. And all of those kind of revolve around a couple of big buckets of priorities for the project. As you know, we have a major change in a net improvement, significant net improvement in network security, which is a big, milestone for applications that have certain security requirements in the network. Secondly, we've been actively in the network. Secondly, we've been spreading a message of why developers should care about this technology outside of the crypto industry. So as you know, we've been putting a lot of our focus into and tutorials need to be there, and how do we reach out to these people? What types of events, hackathons, developer conferences, et cetera, to be more directly speaking to this community of developers. So you'll likely see that come together both through our ecosystem team, but also through kind of a renewed focus on developer evangelism. And then we're also putting a lot more thinking and structure into a coin holder engagement and governance process. This is probably going to take the form of having a significantly more regular cadence of getting you guys involved in how we make decisions for the foundation through our priorities over the course of the coming years. So those are, high level the priorities that we have in front of us beyond our engineering roadmaps, both for our Java team and our Rust teams. So stay tuned on all of those fronts. Second question was really around fiat on-ramps for Aeon. I'm not going to talk specifically about any exchanges, but I think what I'll say as kind of a high-level premise is we're not ignorant to this. We have not forgotten about this priority. This is not something that we talk about publicly. There are many reasons for that, but we very strongly believe that coin accessibility leads to improved security, leads to more developer adoption, and leads to just an overall better ecosystem that people feel like they're participating in and that they're getting value out of. And so coin accessibility continues to be a top priority. Each partner that we talk to, listing partner, staking partner, custody partner, wallet company, they all have their own process. They all have their own timelines. They all have their own engineering requirements. And we are going through those processes with a lot of the top, most reputable projects in each of their categories. So many of these timelines are not in our control, but we work through the process with these partners, and we're pretty confident about a number of them coming to fruition in short order. So stay tuned. These are not things that we can kind of give you, a head start clue on, but we will let you know when these things happen, when these integrations are complete. The third question was really focusing in on adoption and where are we at in terms of adoption. And I'll say, we've stopped thinking about network adoption as being a factor of like how many apps are on the network, for the simple reason that when we looked across the crypto industry, we realized that like 99% of these apps have no users. And so a measure of how many apps is not sufficient for us. We've looked at many of the top networks out there that are being viewed as kind of like the high profile blockchain systems that have little to no transaction volume, little to no usage. And we're really focusing on making sure we get quality businesses building quality applications that have the potential to open themselves up to huge user bases. And so our metrics, and when we look at internally, we have a structure we call our OKRs, or our objectives and key results. And our objectives in this category, more organic use, million small apps. So it's not, one way or the other. It's just how do we get more usage of the network overall. The best way for us to do that, as far as we've been able to observe, is make sure that we continue investing in developer onboarding, tooling, documentation, evangelism, investor relations. We need to convince people why this technology solves a problem in a unique and novel way. And that's not enough, just to tell people that there's a novel set of tools here. But we really have to start speaking the language of the real world and articulate the problems that we think are worth solving with decentralized networks as an underlying infrastructure. And we're making a lot of progress in that direction. The AVM has been an enormous success from our perspective because it's opened the door into a community of people that have just not been actively following this industry, but arguably a community of people that are building like mission critical software. Somebody asked about Project Apollo, and obviously the fact that it has a code name is because we're under NDA. We can't tell you exactly what that is, but I'll tell you this is one of these applications that we're extremely excited about that is kind of in the final stages of getting ready for a release on the public network that we think has a huge potential addressable market with what it's building. And so you'll hear more about Project Apollo when they actually reveal themselves and when the company starts talking about what they're building. And we've been supporting them through our ecosystem team. So stay tuned for that. Next question was around making sure that there's awareness building up around Aon. What a message is compelling to the rest of the world. And we've specifically focused in on the Java developer community to make sure that we grow an audience, companies in the world that I think would be a pretty exciting piece of news if we can get them across the finish line. But the fact that we have demonstrated an ability to build sophisticated conferences and talking to different types of partners that I think is going to be a big differentiator for Aon moving forward. So next big question is around unity economics. And there's a lot of specific questions here about how exactly the reward mechanisms are going to work and the supply mechanisms are going to work. And I guess the simple answer right now is that we have built all of our proof of concepts for different models around Unity. Our Aon research and roadmap team has been working on this for months. Our production engineering team is starting to build through the production roadmap of the Unity algorithm. But we're still working with economists externally and game theorists externally, and we're testing out different mechanisms to get the economics right. So we don't have a perfect answer for you yet. We are, in a very deliberate economic kind of research phase right now. The mechanics of the tech and how the proof of stake and proof of work are going to interact together on Unity is essentially solved from the research that our team did. And we're building that out, but a lot of the variables that lead to the economic distribution and the rewards are still being finalized. So there'll be a lot more to tell you about that as we get closer. There was another question kind of further down the list that kind of ties into this. Is there going to be tools for people to play around with that kind of give them a feel for how these economics work, what their rewards are going to look like, kind of a calculator that people can interact with? We'll have, again, more ways for you to test and give us feedback on the Unity design between now and its launch date over the course of the next few months. So, we'll do our best to keep you guys as informed as possible as we flesh out some of these details. And I'll just say, unfortunately, we can't name who we're working with, but on the economic and game theory side, the team that we're working with is like world-renowned team of economists and game theorists that are very involved in helping us through this design to make sure that we think through all the edge cases. Okay, next question I think was a pretty long one. So let me just kind of quickly make sure I'm capturing the general sentiment of the question in terms of who the crypto community is made up of: people who hold coins, developers, miners, dApp users. And so a lot of the questions around how do we get a killer dApp to be built on Aon, even if ETH has failed to achieve this. So obviously, I think there's maybe, my perspective at least is that's a nearly impossible question to answer, because the very nature of a killer dApp is that you can't kind of guess what it's going to be until it happens. And so they're a little bit impossible to predict. All we can really do is create an environment where it's easy for people to experiment and innovate and try new ideas until somebody stumbles on a great idea. That's done through better developer documentation, better evangelism, better outreach. And just better messaging around the project and what problems are we solving for the world, and why should people be trying to build their next solution on top of infrastructures like Aon. Not necessarily messaging that to a bunch of Ethereum developers, but messaging that to companies in the software world. And part of that focus for us and our ecosystem team has been getting a lot of conversations going with what we would call Web 2 companies or traditional software companies, and talking to them about what challenges they face and how does a blockchain or a decentralized network give them a new set of tools to address those challenges. These are challenges of trust, challenges of centralization, challenges of asset distribution and tokenization. And so we're actually spending a lot of time with more traditional normal software companies and to build kind of their first blockchain application that kind of stitches into their business. Also gives us a great on-ramp towards larger user bases if these are like proven applications and web service companies. Participate in these meetings and the overall strategy of the Enterprise Ethereum Alliance. And as it relates to Aon, we have been very actively talking within that group about what the AVM means to an enterprise audience, especially because of it opens us up to Java. There's been a lot of limitations and people's hesitations around Solidity and the Ethereum virtual machine. So we are in the process of introducing the AVM as a potential new standard that would get more collaboration, more usage. We have a number of projects outside of the EEA, but other public blockchain projects that are looking at the AVM and integrating it because they see a better design for how do you execute applications on top of a public network. So that'll be part of our EA strategy. It's also part of how do we get AVM adopted by other blockchain systems. Some of you may have seen this is already a project that has started within RSK, where they're actively looking into the AVM and testing an integration. And we've been talking quite a bit with them about that. So we expect to do more of that as it creates a bigger ecosystem of users, tools, functionality around the AVM, and just solidifies the code base over time. Next question, I think, is specifically about one project that has been building on Aeon. Unfortunately, I'm not in the loop on every conversation that every company building on Aeon is in the middle of. So I'd say best thing to do is if you have any specific questions about any specific companies or projects, you should be reaching out to them. We don't have every detail about every company. So that relates obviously to WindMiner. But anybody else, if you have any specific questions about a specific app, best person to reach out to is the team behind that app. So don't hesitate to do that. Hackathons. We've done a few hackathons over the course of the last few months. We've done 3 as we were getting ready for the AVM release. We are currently developing kind of a more thorough hackathon strategy. We don't have anything scheduled yet, but a lot of our hackathon strategy is focused on growing our audience. How do we get a hackathon into a group of developers that are not necessarily from the crypto industry, introduce this to them as a new set of tools that they can use to solve problems in different ways. So we do have a hackathon strategy in the works. There will likely be some form of online hackathon that spans over the course of a couple of weeks. We have not scheduled that hackathon yet, but we're working through the logistics, and we'll announce more when there's more to tell. All right, what's the next question here? Regular dev communities and how do we make sure more people have heard of us? So again, I think the bigger question for us around awareness, I think we have a general, community by normal standards. We're more focused on how do we lay down some roots and establish ourselves as a voice outside of the blockchain industry talking about these problems. This has been a big part of our strategy over the course of the last year. A big required milestone for us to be taken seriously outside of the crypto industry was the launch of the AVM and the upcoming launch of Unity. So these 2 technical milestones open us up to now talking about Aeon as a differentiated network design, a differentiated infrastructure, and we can start more actively and aggressively going after kind of dev outreach in those communities. And by default, we think that there will be people in the crypto community that find it interesting as well. But we are not going to be directly going into Ethereum working groups and telling them why they should be building on Aeon. We're going to be spending a lot more time talking to the millions of developers in the Java community over the course of the next 6 to 12 months. Okay, the next question is around marketing, and I'll say twofold. One, AVM and Unity are big milestones that are directly tied to our ability to talk about how different and how distinct building on Aeon is compared to other projects. But really, a lot of our marketing strategy to date has been research-driven. It's been understanding what problems developers face, understanding why there has not been a massively successful application on a public. So again, we're trying to not just do more of the same, not play copycat marketing to everybody else in the industry, but our insight in this space is that we need to have a differentiated view of what problems we're addressing and how do we communicate those problems to people. What are those problems is something that we're going to answer by talking to developers, talking to thousands of developers. We're running surveys, we're interviewing companies, we're talking to CTOs, and we're trying to start doing more aggressive marketing around those problem statements. Those problem statements will also be mostly directed to traditional software companies, as I said, and more talking about, hey, did you know that you could solve this problem with a decentralized infrastructure? So these 2 things are very hand in hand. We have most of our marketing team focusing on dev research, our ecosystem team focusing on dev research, and that's informing a lot of what we're doing on our documentation to make sure that our marketing strategy does not just look like everybody else's marketing strategy. So in terms of Java developer interest to date, we've had a pretty good month, I would say, since AVM launch and since the announcement of people reaching out to us, asking us for more information, Java developers taking kind of a spin of our code base. Most excitingly, I think I already kind of gave a hint to one of the largest Java-based companies in the world that's now very clued into what we're doing and has an internal team kind of diving into the design of the AVM and how it interacts with the Java virtual machine. And so this is leading us into Java community groups, Java conferences, talking to companies that are, again, traditional software companies, and we're starting to see a lot of interest. We'll probably culminate this interest into one of these hackathons, into a more deliberate marketing strategy that targets these people with the AVM. Next question is about two integrations that I think were referred to in the last showcase, or one of the last showcases. We mentioned an integration that was being built towards Portis Wallet and Aon Custodian Services. Both of these are still ongoing. So Portis specifically is an integration that is starting shortly, and it's they're just as we are doing with a number of other tools and wallets. We're going to be constantly working towards like adding to the ecosystem of supported tools. On the custody side, this is kind of twofold. As we go towards Unity, there's a need for us to be talking to a lot of staking companies that do staking services and custody companies that start to build out kind of like secure custody offerings for people to manage their Aon more efficiently. So there are ongoing tracks and partnership conversations and integration work being done on custody on here. But here's how I'll put it for you. We understand the concerns coming from the community. We're going to do a better job to daily fluctuations or events that are outside of our control. Our perspective on Aon's market position is that we're confident that if we have a differentiated marketing strategy and if we're the only project effectively addressing the concerns of one community, the mainstream Java developer community, this will be reflected in our market position over time. So this is probably the most I can say, but obviously we feel this as well. This is an important priority for us, our market position in terms of how people perceive our project, how they think about Aon's differentiation and our product definition is critically important to us. So we're constantly reevaluating this. We're constantly trying out new ideas, and I wouldn't worry too much about the fact that the Aon team or Matt are just ignoring us as we kind of put comments online. We are not ignoring you. We just have to address these things kind of in their appropriate sequence, and we can't tell everything. We can't say everything that you'd like us to say publicly. So we're going to kind of keep our lips a little bit buttoned up on that. Finally, next question. There's a question about MavenNet. MavenNet, as many of you know, is a company managed and operated by my friend and former partner Kesem, and it is a company that is a very close and important part of our ecosystem. We do a lot of work with them, but no, I do not have any legal ties or legal attachments to this company. No, the foundation is not an investor in this company, but yes, they are an important partner, an important member of our ecosystem, and we often interact with them and have done some projects with them, including the Maven Bridge, which was an implementation of the bridge that we had built last year with our bridging team. So that's probably all I'll say about that. But yeah, feel free to ask more questions in that direction if you want. All right, the next question I think is about the TRS. I think it's probably worth stepping back because I'm not sure when and who was involved in the community at what points in time. Just to give you some perspective, the TRS is not something we control. The TRS is an automated distribution mechanism that was completely open and inclusive to anybody in the community who wanted to participate. As a result of that TRS, there are monthly distributions that hit the market. And most of those distributions do not come into the Aon Foundation's coffers. This is not our coin distribution. This is an automated smart contract coin distribution that takes place independent of us, and it is part of the economic design of Aon. Obviously, we hear you that there are concerns and people have raised issues about this. A big part of our economic design is going through a complete redesign and revamp of this along with the Unity release date. So Unity is going to be built to address a lot of these concerns that many of us. The TRS is not something that can be changed or will be changed because But a lot of these economic concerns are things that are being revisited in the design of Unity to make sure that we're not blind to some of these challenges that impact the supply of the market and things like that. So as we start publishing Unity output, it'd be great to have more feedback from the community in that direction. So, and there's a number of people inside the team working on this, including Art, including Depeche, including some of our third-party partners that are, solid in both economics and game theory, but also taking a lot of my attention and Sam's attention and others. So you're going to hear a lot more about Unity up and coming. The next question, I think, is more around our positioning with respect to Cosmos, Polkadot, and our focus on interoperability. I think I've mentioned this a couple of times over the course of the last few months. This is an area that I think people react differently to. The one way that I could probably summarize this best is our conclusions after spending a year focusing on interoperability is that as we prioritize what needs to be built to make mainstream adoption more likely, interoperability does not seem as imminent as we originally thought. We're not saying this is not an important piece of infrastructure. We're not saying that we are completely deprioritizing it. We're saying we're reprioritizing it to later in our roadmap. And in the meantime, we have a lot of respect for the teams at Cosmos and Polkadot. We're very curious with what they're building, and we're really excited to see what they come up with. Our focus has essentially been readjusted to what do we think are the most significant and imminent obstacles to adoption. So this is where we've been focusing on the AVM, on tooling, on the Unity economic design and security design. And those continue to be the focus of our engineering and research teams. And we wish the best to Cosmos and Polkadot as they continue going after the solution statement around interoperability. And we're going to be staying very close to that. Our research team is constantly paying attention to new releases, new updates in that direction. And as you know, we do have a relationship with both of these projects. So we have a good window into all the development that's being done there. And the great part about this ecosystem and this industry is that we're all developing this stuff very publicly, very open source, and we're going to have the ability to kind of piggyback off of each other's innovations as the market proves what's important and what's useful. So that's the current stance of the Aeon Foundation. I think there was a quick question about Pomp or Anthony Pompliano. Thank you, everyone who had a role to play in kind of berating him with tweets. By all means, don't hesitate to continue doing that. We love having you involved with getting the attention of certain companies, certain influencers. We are in touch with Pomp's team. We're trying to decide the best timing for us to have kind of a public is that we still constantly hear from these companies that they don't understand why they should use a blockchain. And so I think this is kind of an existential problem for our whole industry. What problem are you solving? Why is this important to my business? There's obviously some really interesting innovation happening, like net new on top of the blockchain, on top of different protocols that are kind of novel Web3 crypto applications. But when we think about why this infrastructure is important to the rest of the world, articulating that problem is still a big gap. And our big focus right now is to get better at stating the problem, stating why companies should care about this, and then giving them the tools to kind of prove it for themselves. So this is a big part of our long-term strategy. In the short term, I think this is still going to bear a lot of fruit because we're now having more impactful conversations with companies that 2 years ago we never would have thought would have been open to building something on top of a public network. And now we're seeing the comfort level of some of these larger companies shift, where many of them are open to public blockchain applications, public blockchain infrastructure, but we still need to articulate why. Why would they build parts of their business on this? What type of software is best suited for a decentralized network? And so that's been a big part of our focus. And we think there's going to be a huge trend towards large companies shifting their perspective towards public blockchains. And so that's going to be a big area that Aeon plays in over the course of the next 6 to 12 months again. Next question, I think I already answered about the staking rewards calculator. I can't say specifically what that's going to look like, but I can tell you that as we finalize the Unity design, there will be a way for you to understand how it impacts you, understand how to give feedback if you have any disagreement with how we're building it, feedback to be. Are you working with any big IT companies like IBM, Microsoft, HP, et cetera, to adapt the AVM? Again, as many of you know, we're often restricted from talking about which of our focus on mature software. I think is gaining the attention of the companies that we were hoping it would. So that's the way that we measure the success of the AVM strategy to date. Is anything else popping up? No. All right. Cool. I'm going to keep going with the list that we have that was pre-submitted. Next question, I think, is about Singularity University, my role on the blockchain faculty there, and the narrative of Singularity University. I mean, this has been a big part of my motivation in this industry, is understanding why the blockchain industry matters to kind of in the bigger picture. So not so much just crypto for crypto's sake, but what global impact are we potentially building towards? I think Singularity University is a great vehicle to have those conversations. This is a group of people that are, kind of futurists and really creative thinkers that talk about the problem in a way, or talk about the world in a way that most people don't. And I think it's going to continue to be a really great stage and great association for me to maintain. I do have a good relationship with Salim Ismail, who somebody brought up in the question. Salim continues to be an advisor at Aeon's. Continues to be somebody that we spend time with, and is somebody involved in Velocia, who you are all probably well aware of, our partners at Velocia that are in the process of launching their application on top of Aeon with their pilot program rolling out in Miami. But I don't want to give away too many details there because I'll leave that to them. But yeah, Salim is still very close to our project, and we spend a lot of time with him. I see him probably on a monthly, if not every couple of months basis. Next question, I think I kind of already addressed, partnering with big tech companies. We already do, I think it's worth pointing out, we already do have an integration with Microsoft Azure on the Azure Cloud Marketplace. That's already available. We've also been talking quite a bit with that team, as well as a number of the big tech infrastructure companies, around integrating support for Java development on the AVM into their developer tools. This kind of piggybacks off of the work that we've already done with tools like IntelliJ and Maven and Gradle. We're trying to go through the short list of high-profile dev tools that are already very well established and well used by software developers kind of around the world. Next question about Charles Hoskinson, IOHK, Cardano. Charles and I have a great relationship. We've had a number of conversations with Cardano about the design of our AVM. I think there continues to be interest. We do not have a formalized partnership to publicly discuss today, but this is going to continue to be a team that we look up to, and that we're going to continue bringing the AVM design to. And I think we've got enough interest from them to have a pretty productive conversation about possible future collaboration, but nothing concrete at this stage. Next question, maybe a little bit more personal. As CEO of a company that's part of building a new industry, what challenges have you faced? Whether it's dealing with market sentiment or finding talent, I'm interested in your approach to tackling some of these issues. I think one of the industry, the balance between making sure you have the information that you need and that you deserve, because you've been such loyal supporters of ours, while also balancing our focus and balancing, how do we manage priorities? Not every one of our priorities can be measured in weeks and months. Some of our priorities are much more macro than that, and we have to constantly fight that balance. I think some of our biggest challenges have been making sure that we are shining a light on our successes. We have an incredibly credible and solid team. I think a world-class team. I think people that get familiar with Aeon are convinced that we are in a very, very small class of leading projects in terms of technical substance. I think we still have a long way to go in terms of learning how to be appropriately casting a spotlight onto that talent. And so you're going to see a constant adjustments from us to do better. It's constantly finding a way to highlight the talent we have, find new talent to pull into the organization and into our ecosystem. But this is not a people problem. I think we have all the right people on our boat, if I can put it that way. And now it's just a matter of configuration, a matter of messaging, a matter of articulating to you and the rest of the world what problems are we trying to solve. But more than anything, I feel kind of motivated. I think I'm constantly surrounded by people that keep me enthusiastic about the problems we're solving. And we keep reminding ourselves that we're not only in a new industry, but we're in a new industry that has the promise to have a fundamental and important change on the world. So that kind of what drives us every day. And obviously the support that we get from you is a big part of that. And so we're not blind or ignorant or ignoring, I should say, any of the concerns or questions that you bring up. And we're going to do a better job at giving you a voice in our decision-making process, giving you a voice to, comment on decisions that we've made, criticize decisions that we've made. But keep in mind that we're constantly balancing internal priorities while trying to balance external communication. And so sometimes that may look like we're not prioritizing exactly what you would like from us, but we're not doing that in a vacuum. We're very specifically evaluating the pros and cons of one priority over another, because we do still have to balance resources, we have to balance focus, and we have to make sure that we're still keeping our eye on the long-term prize and the North Star of what we're building. I think the next question is around our presence in Europe. Do we have any plans to open an office there? I'd say, short answer is no, but long answer is we have a great partnership with a company out of Romania that we've been doing work with for the last year and a half, a company called Centrus that has been responsible for the Theo project, the Senior wallet, and a number of other things, including a project that is like a market expansion decision that we're making anytime soon to open a new office. We continue to maintain our offices in Toronto, Shanghai, and Barbados. Have you considered reaching out to Consensus and to try to do something cool together with those folks that would benefit both Ethereum and Aeon? We've had a long-standing relationship with Consensus. We have lots of friends who work inside the company and have worked inside that company. I continue to serve on the board of directors of the Enterprise Ethereum Alliance alongside Consensus, alongside Joe Lubin, and others. And I'd say we have a very good relationship, but Consensus's business model is very, very specifically focused on supporting the growth of the Ethereum ecosystem. That being said, we have had interest of certain members of the Consensus teams that are working more within the enterprise markets around what we've built with the AVM, because it addresses a lot of their concerns around solidity in the EVM. So again, we're getting this theme around people like what we've done with Java, they like what we've done with the AVM, and I think we're going to have a lot of traction around building out a community of users behind that component, which will validate our tech stack and start to build out like a larger set of templates for smart contracts, a larger set of tools that are all supported on top of the same VM, and turning that into a little bit more of an industry standard. I would not be surprised if that kind of ends up having some involvement from certain members or teams within Consensus. The next question, in terms of giving value to Aeon, I think I've generally addressed that. This is not a one-way thing. This is a massively dynamic market. There are a lot of factors that feed into this. Many of these factors are short-term, and many of these factors are long-term. We're trying to find the balance between, how much focus should we have on the long-term while maintaining, enough responsible view on the short-term. But I think everybody who's followed us for long enough knows that we're a long-term substance-first project. For good or for bad, we adjust and we learn along the way. But we're going to continue to stay true to that. We're going to continue to stay true to being a long-term substance-first project. But not to say that we cannot kind of optimize our messaging and optimize our communication strategy. So we're going to continue doing that. And as I said, we're in constant discussions with partners that impact the coin accessibility, impact how people can get access to the coin, and what that means for the security and distribution of our network. We are in the middle of integrations, partnership conversations, listing conversations. All of those have their own timelines. All of those are independently complicated depending on which companies we're talking to. So this is not something that's universally or only in our control. We have to rely on third parties to support us. Last question I had pre-submitted, and we'll see if there's anything else that pops up. But what were the contributing factors to de-emphasizing interoperability for building an entirely new blockchain platform ecosystem? So maybe two things. One, I don't want to phrase this as de-emphasizing interoperability. I think we as a project have always been trying to solve how do you build a useful infrastructure for developers. What components are part of a useful infrastructure for developers? Our thesis has changed over time because we learn and we research and we kind of polish our perspective. And so, as I said earlier, I think a lot of our views around interoperability are that this is a critical thing to solve, but may not be the first thing that needs to be solved. As a matter of thinking of what is the barriers to adoption, what is holding people back, we constantly get this question asked to us, what's the point of connecting two networks that have no usage? That's maybe not the right answer to getting more usage. Fullness of the systems that we've built. That is slowly starting to change, but our focus has been only on how do we make the adoption ramp go up faster. Interoperability will probably be part of the long-term infrastructure challenge that we face, but we think there are more imminent problems to solve. And this is, I've been shying away from, are we a standalone blockchain platform and ecosystem? I still think there's a lot of ways for us to be collaborative with other projects. And the way we define what we're building and the language we use in what we're building has a big part to play in how do we convince people to build on top of this. So people that don't view themselves as blockchain developers are potentially less keen to build on a blockchain, but maybe more keen to build on a decentralized infrastructure that solves, data ownership problems. So we're testing different messages and different narratives. Interoperability, I think, will become part of the long-term design. It's just a matter of when is it the right time to be investing in that research. All right, I think that's it. Maybe I'll go back to the Reddit just to make sure nothing else has been submitted. If not, oh, there's something here. Okay, here we go. Matt, are you concerned at all with project running out of funds before you can get off the ground? Oh, this is a good question. So I think as many of you know, we're very public about our finances. The next release of our finances will come out for the June 30th date. We release finances every 3 months, so we release some financial statements on March 31st. It usually takes us 3 to 4 weeks to prepare them and publish them. So March 31st got released sometime in April. June 30th will get released sometime in July. So stay tuned for that. No, our financial stability and our funds are not our top concern right now. We feel very confident about where we're at with our runway and the amount of money we have, and very confident that we have more than sufficient funds to prove our thesis. So this is definitely not the top concern for the project by any means. But if you have any questions about the financial information that we're going to publish, I think we can probably set up an opportunity to ask those questions after the June 30th statements have been published. That probably goes along with the next question around how many months of runway. Obviously, that number changes all the time depending on factors like the price of Bitcoin. We still maintain a certain amount of Bitcoin on our balance sheet. And are we hiring or are we staying stagnant? But generally speaking, we've continued to maintain a runway north of 2 years, and even when we decide to spend more, those runways generally end up in north of 2 years. But I would say wait until our June 30th numbers are published, and you'll have a lot more specific information at that point, because we are prioritizing new hires that are going to change the amount that we're spending on a monthly basis. That's it. All right, I think that's it. I think we've answered pretty much all the questions and themes. Thank you so much for being patient with us. I hope that the cadence that we're going to get into around AMAs, around community surveys, you're going to continue to see weekly AMAs from different members of the team. I'll make sure that I'm doing these no less frequently than quarterly. And then similarly, we'll be doing surveys to get feedback from you on that same cadence on a quarterly basis. But between now and then, there's going to be a lot more information coming out of the project, especially as we ramp up for Unity. So stay tuned and looking forward to your feedback. Thanks, everyone, for tuning in today. Talk to you soon.